Picture this. You are the proud parent of a bright and talented young woman. At just 18 years of age, her entire life stretches out ahead of her, and it promises to be a good one. She is legally an adult now, and her first semester at a state university will begin in just a matter of weeks. Already, time has flown by, and you can scarcely believe that your little girl is now ready to leave home for good. You know that you raise a smart and independent young woman with her values firmly rooted in your family's Catholic faith, but you worry. She will be attending a secular university where any number of worldly temptations may distract her from her purpose. Or worse. But then, someone from church, that nice lady with 8 kids who is always inviting your daughter to prayer retreats, actually, mentions that she should apply for a room at a student residence for young women on the outskirts of campus. Not only is tuition cheaper than the going rate, but you read on the residence's website that the spiritual and doctrinal formation is administered by a Catholic religious organization that you've never really heard of before called Opus Dei. There are so many religious organizations, though, it can be hard to keep track. Lots of them are involved in education, but it's Catholic, right? And it's off campus and safer. It promises to be a home away from home, where your daughter's education will be supported and where you know not only her physical, but also religious and spiritual health will be tended to. What more could you ask for? There is actually quite a bit that you and your daughter will not learn until she has already passed the threshold and entered the residence. There are some things that, if you had known, might have made you reconsider how placidly you handed over your own flesh and blood. Because little do you know that Opus Dei, an organization that has been referred to as secretive and more than a little controversial, also allegedly uses the residence as a front for recruiting more young women into its ever-dwindling ranks as some obedient celibate fanatics, not of the Catholic Church, but of the teachings of a long-dead Spanish priest named Jose Maria Escriva. Friends, I have already written at length about the various subversive ways that I believe Opus Dei has infiltrated our society. From the highest courts in our lands to the White House itself, an organization with fewer than 100,000 members worldwide nonetheless managed to have an outsized impact on everything from politics and economics to education. In my opinion, it has all been intentional, each expansion carrying out another aspect of the vision Opus Dei's founder had. Escriva saw his organization as the vehicle to carry out a necessary re-Christianization of society and the world. The fact that the version of Christianity that Opus Dei appears to support looks nothing like the Christ-centered faith most people are familiar with is irrelevant. Today's episode is something that I have been quietly and furiously working on for the last several months. It's finally ready to see the light of day, and I am pleased to be presenting my latest endeavor in independent citizen journalism and research. In this episode, I am going to share what I've learned about the Catholic organization Opus Dei and its influence on American society through its student residences, and lay out why I have developed a critical and largely negative opinion of this organization's hyper-fixation on education and why I believe that people should proceed with caution. There are any number of avenues that one could take to analyze this issue, but as always, my research is victim-survivor-led. I prefer to listen to the people who have gone through these institutions and systems and come out on the other side. So, in addition to my own reading and research, today's episode also features the stories of 2 young women who were both recruited into Opus Dei student residences while at university here in the United States within the last 10 years. My name is Beck Griffin. Welcome to the Deep Dive Project. Before we begin, I need to issue a couple of disclaimers. I know that these are boring, but I need us all to be crystal clear on these points. First and foremost, because of the subjects we will be discussing, this episode comes with a content warning as it may not be appropriate for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. All of the information that I am presenting in this video can be found in the source document down below and is publicly available on the World Wide Web. Additionally, this video is a representation of my opinion of the Opus Dei student residence model here in the United States, which I formed by reading publicly sourced information, listening to hours of interviews, and speaking with individuals who can claim that firsthand knowledge and experience. And that brings me to another important point. The views and opinions expressed in this video are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities that they refer to. I have done my best to fact check and verify everything that I am presenting along with citing my sources, but even so, this should not be considered totally comprehensive or complete in any way. Take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research. Do not contact, attempt to contact, or harass anyone mentioned in this video on behalf of me, yourself, or anyone else. The purpose of this video and of the Deep Dive Project as a whole is to give my perspective on issues related to human rights and to notify you about matters of public concern. In his book, Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church, author Gareth Gore described Opus Dei's influence within American society thus. Opus Dei boasts special privileges enjoyed by no other organization within the Catholic Church that for years have allowed it to effectively function outside the usual hierarchy, giving it unprecedented freedom to operate wherever it likes, answerable to nobody but the Pope. These special powers were granted in the early 1980s at a time when the Vatican was mired in deep financial trouble and amid swirling rumors about Opus Dei's role in a huge financial bailout for the Holy See. These privileges catapulted the group into the upper echelons of the Catholic Church, legitimizing it among the faithful, turbocharging its recruitment efforts, and facilitating the canonization of its founder. Since the 1990s, Opus Dei has exploited this legitimacy to ally itself with conservative forces within the Church, especially in the United States. Opus Dei has been operating within American society in some capacity since at least the early 1950s. Student residences operated by people affiliated or directly involved with Opus Dei have been a feature of the Opus Dei expansion playbook since its inception. In one of the earliest foundational documents that Jose Maria Escriva, the founder of Opus Dei, wrote, he detailed the recruitment methods that he wanted members to employ. Quoting from Opus once more, Escriva ordered his followers to focus their efforts on young people and avoid anyone over the age of 25, explaining that older people have a tendency to be set in their ways, although perhaps it was simply that they were less susceptible to being recruited into what was increasingly looking like a religious cult. Secrecy was another feature. Quote, he advised members to tell anyone showing an interest in joining Opus Dei to keep it to themselves. Instruct the new ones to shut up, he wrote, because their calling is like a little candle that has just been lit, and it would only take one small breath to extinguish it completely in their heart. Escriva considered student residences essential. In fact, university students were the first group of desirables that Escriva identified wanting to recruit during the organization's earliest days in Spain. It proved to be worthwhile enough that Opus Dei has replicated the model around the world ever since. One of the earliest student residences in the United States was on Marlborough Street in Boston, Massachusetts, intended for young men attending Harvard and MIT. In late 1964, another property on Commonwealth Avenue was transformed into another student residence, this time for women. I am sure that it is no accident that two of the first US-based universities in Opus Dei sites are two of the most prestigious universities in the world. In Opus, Gore wrote, by the early 60s, the platform given at Harvard, as well as the hard work of members who set up student residences in Madison, Washington, St. Louis, Milwaukee, and elsewhere, had begun to bear fruit. After a dozen years in the States, Opus Dei had recruited about 400 Americans. The United States had become one of its biggest strongholds outside Spain. If we fast forward through time to the 21st century, a 2003 article on Church and State outlines how the Opus Dei stronghold in America grew, particularly in regard to student residences, which were, like I said, strategically located near prestigious schools including MIT, Northeastern, Boston University, Notre Dame, UCLA, Columbia, Harvard, Boston College, Princeton, Marquette, University of Illinois, Brown University, Georgetown University, Rice University, UC Berkeley, University, Stanford University, University of San Francisco, St. Louis University, American University, and more. These student residences are an integral part of the Opus Dei apparatus because they provide a nexus point for gathering, interacting with, and recruiting from the ranks of the latest generation of young people poised to enter the professional world. Quote, in addition to providing a housing solution for college students, these residences serve as recruiting centers by targeting young, naive, bright, and busy students. Opus Dei holds recruiting workshops for their numerary members who are told to recruit students who are involved in many campus activities, preferably influential ones, such as student government or the student newspaper. Members are also taught what questions to ask their friends, how to invite them on a retreat, how to talk to them about confession, and how to approach the subject of becoming a member of Opus Dei.
Yeah, so I grew up in my upbringing was, traditional, very Catholic. So my parents wanted to raise me within that religion. My parents always, they instilled that in me and basically almost forced me to do that.
So your parents weren't ever involved with Opus Dei in the parish that you guys were going to. They weren't being like overt about the fact that there was an Opus Dei presence there?
No, like they had no idea either what that was until I, came across them and lived with them for a bit. The people at my parish, they got to me, they just had a way to kind of, convince me that the way that they live, that their faith is the correct one, quote unquote. And so then once college came up, I was, invited to retreats and all of that. So, that's how I first came across Opus Dei. But before that, I was not aware of them. I didn't know that my parish was affiliated with them or who they were at all.
I believe that the fact that they are consistently in close proximity to prestigious universities is not accidental, although the organization has certainly gone to great lengths to downplay that. In an article published on EWTN, the Opus PR is on full display when it states that although these institutions, universities, schools, student study centers, student residences, conference centers, and professional or vocational training institutes of various kinds have an apostolic purpose, they are not officially Catholic, since members of Opus Dei conduct them on their own and in collaboration with others who are not only not members of Opus Dei, but in many cases, not even Catholic. Opus Dei itself takes responsibility only for the spiritual and doctrinal aspects of the programs of these institutions, not for their practical and professional management. Now, it is my personal opinion and belief that this is all bullshit and that in an organizational sense, Opus Dei is very invested in the success of these allegedly unassociated and secular ventures. Numerous former members have spoken out and declared that the two primary goals of these ventures are to generate income and recruits for the organization. I was invited to consider applying for a room at a student residence after a change in my financial situation necessitated that I find new living arrangements in order to continue studying at my university. The person who invited me neglected to mention that the residence is affiliated with Opus Dei, an organization she also belonged to and had never told me over the course of what I thought was our friendship. Once on the inside, it was difficult not to notice Opus Dei's presence. I completed the admissions process and was accepted. Almost immediately, I noticed that the residence environment was completely structured around rigid routines, with many references to the work and the Father, or our Father. I quickly learned that the work referred to Opus Dei and the Father to the organization's founder, Jose Maria Escrivá, whom I heard a lot about during the religious doctrine classes I was obliged to attend. To me, a regular practicing Catholic, the fervor and devotion that I saw numeraries display for Escrivá freaked me out. I had never experienced anything like it. In the Church and State article that I referenced earlier, author Michael Walsh, who wrote Opus Dei, an investigation into the secret society struggling for power within the Roman Catholic Church, was quoted saying, "It is a sophistry to distinguish either of these kinds of enterprise from purely Opus Dei ones. First, all profits made by numerary members in whatever capacity accrue to Opus itself. That is the consequence of the obligation of poverty which they have taken upon themselves. Even supernumerary or married members are under pressure to give as much as possible to the organization. Secondly, no numerary member certainly, and probably no supernumerary member either, will enter upon a business enterprise without having discussed it at length with his or her director. The obligation to be entirely open with the director applies in this sphere as in any other. And in Opus Dei's own 1950 Constitution, it stated that members of Opus Dei, whether they are acting individually or through associations which might be cultural, artistic, financial, and so on, do so through what are known as auxiliary societies. In their dealings, these societies are equally subject to obedience to the hierarchical authority of the Institute. This internal guidance might be different today. I don't know, since I don't have access to Opus Dei's modern internal documents, but at the very least, I think that there is ample evidence implying that student residences were incredibly important to the organization, and I personally have not seen or heard anything that convinces me otherwise, or that anything has changed present day.
Did you have any reason to believe, or did you find out that these retreats were Opus Dei retreats, or are these just retreats that Opus Dei people happen to attend? Like, how do you know how involved Opus Dei was in the retreat aspect?
Well, they were very involved because that was kind of like their thing of like doing silent retreats, and it was an Opus Dei priest that was doing the mass, the confession, like all of that, he was leading all the activities. It hmm Yeah, and then it was the residents, like from where I used to live, the manager, like the supervisor, and the other numerary, sorry, the other numeraries were the ones that were also managing it. Like they were in charge of like getting the food, like leading us to the activities and everything. So yeah, like those retreats were very much Opus Dei affiliated. It's just that I had no idea because again, it goes back to the same premise that they don't explicitly say who they are or anything. It's just like, oh, we're just a group of women that really believe in the work. That's how they would always describe it, the work. And I would always be so confused because it's like, what the heck is that? What do you mean the work? So yeah, like they never said anything. They don't explicitly say who they are overall. So
So at what point, and I imagine just thinking logically about it, 2020 wraps up, 2021 COVID restrictions start to be relaxed. So I imagine that was around the time that you were considering moving to attend school. And is that kind of when the Opus Dei student residence kind of came on your radar?
yeah, so during the first retreat, one of the numeraries from that residence came up to me and said like, oh, you know, we live here, and we would like to invite you just to come to our residence just for events because they hold circles, which are like the talks that they would do. So they invited me to like their circles, their recollections, which is like a monthly meetup thing. So like at first it was just like an open invitation to just check them out, but then it wasn't until the drive back from to drive back to my house that they were one of the people that attended was like, oh, they actually like have residents that live there at their residence, like you could live there, like instead of dorming, like why don't you try to apply? So it wasn't explicitly the numeraries, ironically, that didn't invite me to live there, but then, you know, like you said, like once it was time to like look for a place because you know now I was finally gonna experience college and stuff, so it was an option. My parents also thought it was a great option. Going back to the way I was raised, they thought it was much safer since it was only women allowed. No guys were allowed. There was a curfew. They seemed like nice people because my parents even came with me to go meet them, like just kind of like to check out the place to see if we liked it. And they seemed really nice, like really nice women. Like it, you know, first they made a really good first impression, so they're very good at that, at like hiding their intentions, who they are. So you know they fooled us well there. So that's when it came to applying. I was even recommended by the priest at my former parish to because it was like a whole application. I had to write an essay or like a personal statement. I had to like state how many languages I speak, what instruments I played, what sports I do, very much like a college application, and so I needed a letter of rec, and so we thought, oh, like why don't we just do the priest at my parish, which was a great idea because they knew him really well. Even when I got accepted, they were like, yeah, we could not reject someone who was rejected by father. So they all knew each other. Everything was connected to everything and everyone. So that's kind of how I got in. It was like I basically turned in the application, and then the next day, even like the next day after visiting them, they like what's it called? They accepted me. They sent me an email like saying like, yeah, like we'll accept you. So
very
it was
quick,
very easy,
very quick,
yeah, very quick.
Before we proceed, I want to take a moment and ask you to hit the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. According to my analytics, 74% of my viewers are not subscribed, and I would really like to shrink that percentage just a little bit. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed so far. And a very, very special thank you to those of you who have also chipped in financially via super chats and coffees. I don't do this work for either of those two things. That's not what motivates me, but work I do, and considering how much time and energy goes into deep dives like this one, it means the absolute world to me that you value the Deep Dive Project so highly. So thank you. On opusinfo.org, there is a page dedicated to a list of Opus Dei affiliated foundations, which also includes some financial records from the early aughts. The figures that are cited are probably extremely out of date now, but in retrospect, they give us an idea of just how much money these individual corporate works were generating in assets. For example, in California, between the Association for Educational Development, the Birkeland Foundation Incorporated, the Menlo Study Center Incorporated, the Peninsula Foundation, the Tilden Study Center, Trumbull Manor Incorporated, and Westwood Study Center Incorporated, Opus Info cites more than $15 million in assets attributable to those entities alone. Those are just the assets that Opus Info was able to track down back then. Adjusted to 2026 inflation, and that $15 million would sit closer to $30 million present day, and that is a lot of cheddar. But I personally believe that if a full tally of Opus Dei's wealth were possible, the final figure would be significantly larger than $30 million. These are all reasons why I find Opus Dei's PR statements dubious at best. I believe that the corporate works, are an integral part of how Opus Dei attempts to facilitate its activities within American society. Let's look at two residences in California: Menlo Study Center Incorporated for men and Westfield Residence for women. On Menlo's About page, they state that Menlo is an educational institution located in Menlo Park, California, near Stanford University. Menlo is dedicated to the professional and character development of college, high school, and professional men. Its activities encourage men to see their studies, work, and family responsibilities from the perspective of growth and virtue and spirit of service. The spiritual dimension of Menlo's activities are entrusted to the Catholic Prelature Opus Dei. Since 1986, the center has served as a resource for the professional and cultural development of university, high school, and adult men in Silicon Valley. Menlo's programs help men dig deep and rediscover their own origins as members of a storied human family and as sons of God, in order to strike out on bold new paths of service to society. Their site also includes a single page discussing the history and formation of Opus Dei as a Catholic institution, but all that Menlo has to say about Opus Dei's influence on the center is that the Christian orientation of the programs at Menlo are entrusted to Opus Dei, a personal prelature of the Catholic Church. For Westfield residents, things are very similar. Their vision and history page states that Westfield is a student residence and cultural center for college and professional women. Westfield inspires women to think globally, work with a social conscience, and acquire skills to become catalysts for positive change in the community. The doctrinal and spiritual formation offered at Westfield is entrusted to Opus Dei, a personal prelature of the Catholic Church. There are other Opus Dei affiliated centers in the region, such as Windsor House and Tilden Study Center, which both use similar and vague rhetoric for declaring their affiliations with the work. From the tone used on these separate sites, I think that a casual observer would be forgiven for not realizing how omnipresent Opus Dei is in the day-to-day administration of these residences and centers. On the face of it, to a casual observer, there does not appear to be anything amiss or out of the ordinary in anything these residences promote. After all, houses of community are hardly new or novel concepts, particularly when it comes to religious organizations or orders. I felt a constant pressure to participate in resident social norms and activities like chats, circles, recollections, and of course, confession to an Opus Dei priest. I never gave in to the pressure to attend confession, but I eventually caved to the pressure to participate in the doctrine classes after non-stop cajoling that bordered on harassment and thinly veiled disapproval of my refusals. The expectation that I would participate seemed very self-evident. Opus Dei is not just any religious organization, and if what former members and attendees, investigative journalists, and human rights activists have alleged is all true, and although all parties must be presumed innocent until proven otherwise, I certainly find it compelling personally, then there is something deeply out of place and wrong on a level that appears systemic within Opus Dei. I think that they have to know that the optics are objectively bad, and it takes very little effort to begin exposing just how convoluted and tangled their alliances are. And once you begin to map these connections and relationships, I believe that it is simply impossible to ignore the fact that for an organization that has gone to great lengths to downplay its participation in political shenanigans, reality looks pretty different.
If you compare my parish to other parishes even in the area, it's not like any others. They're very traditional. They're very into like the Latin Mass, just very strict, like they're the most traditional people. They straight up tell you who to vote for. Well, they don't really say names, but they do like give you like, the signs of which party to vote for because it's in their best of interest. So they never explicitly say like who they are, but their behaviors are definitely different than even other parishes nearby. They would even like comment on like the way women would dress. If a woman was revealing too much, they even had like extra sweaters to give them. It's just like strange behavior. Like very pro-life. Like they're very anti-abortion, very anti-feminist, anti-socialist, you name it,
Fact is, nothing occurs in a vacuum, and that is especially true for Opus Dei student residences, which, in addition to fostering and promoting Jose Maria Escriva's specific vision of re-Christianization for the entire world, serve as a critical component of the Opus Dei conduit that I began identifying and mapping over 5 years ago now. But don't take my word for it. You want to see how the sausage is made, I presume, or you wouldn't still be here. So let's take some time to discuss the network of corporate works, and remember that that is a term for endeavors Opus Dei allegedly doesn't have an interest in that surround just one region of the United States. I'll bet you'll start recognizing some of these names pretty quickly. The Becket Fund. Named after the Catholic saint and martyr Thomas à Becket, a medieval English archbishop, the Becket Fund was created during the mid-90s by a Catholic lawyer named Kevin J. Seamus Hassan. According to the Becket Fund's About page, the organization is a non-profit, public interest, legal, and educational institute with a mission to protect the free expression of all faiths, with supporters representing a myriad of religions, but which all share the common view of a world where religious freedom is respected as a fundamental human right that all are entitled to enjoy and exercise. It is my own personal opinion, all of this is just my opinion, remember, that calling it a common vision is a pretty severe oversimplification of just what exactly Becket is actually going after and supporting, and this is why I think it's useful to look at the Institute's actions rather than just merely taking their word for it.
In retrospect, do you have the feeling, because listening to you tell the story, I have the feeling of almost like these pre-staged dominoes that kind of clicked and fell into place when the moment that you basically got on their radar, for lack of a better term. It was like from the moment that they noticed that, oh, this is a bright, promising young woman, you get invited to the retreats, and then you get invited to the retreats, you find out about the circles and the recollections at the student residence, and then, oh, by the way, they'll let you live there. And it's like, oh, and also don't worry about the letter of recommendation, there's an Opus Dei priest at your parish who can give you one, it's no big deal. Like, it feels like does it feel premeditated to you?
Yeah, totally. Like it all, like you said, kind of like fell into place. It was almost like I had to land there one way or another. And yeah, it wasn't bad. Like, it was a nice place, but the way that they promoted it is not true. Like, the single rooms do not look like that. The space that we had was much smaller than that. We had like less closet room. So they were lying about everything. They also said that the residence was a 5-minute walk from the university, and that's just not true. It was more than that. Like, it was just not a very convenient location to live at.
Lots of false
like the way that they
advertising.
promoted themselves, like it seemed. Mhm. It almost seemed like a like when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be like a sorority kind of like sisterhood type of thing, but it was not like that.
So it's also important to mention that in addition to the lengthy application process that you were required to go through, you were also required to make a non-refundable deposit payment to the center as well, yes?
Yeah, so I did have to pay that. I don't remember the amount right now, but yeah, I think it was like $500 or something that I had to pay.
Enough.
Yeah,
Enough.
just first year it was, yeah, it was like enough that it basically locks you in that place. And like the contract was very odd in a way to say it, because like that's where they aligned like the rules, where there was like a curfew, like I couldn't be like late past like 10:15 or something. No boys allowed, being like open about like, are you gonna come back and eat with us and all of that, because they wanted to almost know our schedules. And from what I know now, from what I understand now, is that they ask people for their schedules now, but at the time when I lived there, they didn't exactly ask us for our schedules, but they could kind of tell like what time you were gonna be back and everything. So yeah, like the contract really laid out the ground rules for living there, and like it's definitely not for a typical college student that wants to have fun and explore. So you just live very, very restricted there.
In a 2024 Political article titled God's Rottweilers Meet the Small Nonprofit Law Firm That's Reshaping American Politics, the then Deputy General Counsel for the Becket Fund, a man named Luke Goodrich, was quoted saying that groups like Americans United and the ACLU are willing to support religious freedom as long as it doesn't conflict with their other values that they hold dear, he says. To me, this hints at the nonprofit's willingness to prioritize religious ideologies over anything else, and I am sure that I do not need to say this, but that's a red flag. Becket might claim to be preoccupied with the religious rights of all faiths, and there are certainly cases in the nonprofit's history that attempt to paint that picture, but it is impossible to deny that in the decades since its inception, Becket's lawyers have begun to weigh in on issues with a more distinct culture war flavor, particularly in regard to LGBTQIA+ and women's reproductive rights. And since then, Becket has become affiliated with dark money networks and patrons linked with right-wing conservative politics in America, like the Koch-backed Donors Trust Foundation, Leonard Leo, and the Heritage Foundation. The Opus Dei threads run strongly through Becket, too. One former attendee of an Opus Dei student residence on the West Coast told me that the person who had initially befriended them and invited them to begin attending activities at the student residence had also interned for the Becket Fund at one time, which could be pure happenstance, but because of what I've read and been told, it does add to my perception that these student residences are just one part of a vast network that has been created in order to streamline placing the right kinds of people with the right outlook and perspective in the right places at the right times. Networking has always been the name of the game, but to me, it feels like the ostensibly disparate organizations and individuals that I am referring to have really taken that concept and, in true American fashion, viciously capitalized on it. The University Catholic Center. According to the University Center's About Us page, the UCC is administered by the Missionary Society of St. Paul the Apostle at UCLA in order to provide Catholic evangelization, reconciliation, and ecumenical and interfaith relations. This is all accomplished through a plethora of activities and programs as well as the Catholic sacraments. UCC wants students involved in any number of community activities such as music ministry, focused prayer groups, retreats, and service projects. I also noticed that Live Action, the anti-choice outfit that has done a ton of work stigmatizing life-saving medical care for women, has a special initiative called Live Action and Pregnant on Campus and has its own page on the UCC site as well, which I just thought I'd mention. I also think that it is interesting that UCC claims to serve an interfaith community, but on their site they have an entire menu dedicated to becoming Catholic, receiving adult confirmation and baptism, and even marriage preparation. And I don't know, maybe you can serve a diverse faith community and also encourage everyone coming through your doors to convert to your obviously correct and morally righteous religious ideology and not have there be any conflicts of interest or ethical quagmires. But I personally find that kind of hard to believe. Although UCC is not affiliated with Opus Dei and with the network of allied entities that I've been describing here, because of the number of religious students who end up flocking to UCC events and programs, I think that it would be a little silly to think that Opus Dei would waste such an obvious recruitment opportunity like that. Although this is just hearsay, I was told by a former UCLA student that it was not uncommon to see someone from the Westfield residence, and the only people who live at Westfield are students and numerary members of Opus Dei, in attendance at UCC events, promoting its various retreats, recollections, adorations, activities, and so on. I've also heard that crossing the tracks, so to speak, to attend events and gatherings promoted by non-Opus affiliated entities has been an apostolate activity intended to find and encourage fresh participation from the pool of desirables in attendance at American universities. Over the course of my time living there, around 2 years, I began to notice a number of things that bothered me deeply as a feminist and a Catholic. There seemed to be a rules for thee but not for me attitude towards certain individuals who appear to have curried favor with the residents' numeraries. Some of these people seem to fit neatly into a certain archetype within the organization. I was exposed to what I would describe as a conservative and neoliberal soup, where anti-BIPOC, union, LGBTQIA+, and social justice dog whistles and attitudes were fostered and encouraged. Because of my Catholic liberal arts high school education, I also began to notice what appeared to be the subversion and hijacking of Catholic social teaching, as well as advocacy for doing away with the separation of church and state and free speech and covert dissent against the Pope. The Zephyr Institute. The Zephyr Institute is an allegedly independent academic center in Palo Alto, California. According to their About Us page, Zephyr serves Stanford students, scholars, and young professionals through what they describe as the study of perennial questions about the nature of the good life in order to evaluate the effects of emerging social, technological, and cultural trends via reading groups, seminars, intellectual retreats, and conferences for students, faculty, and professionals throughout the Bay Area. They claim that their work is guided by 3 core principles, which I am going to go ahead and say now I find incredibly interesting based on what I have learned and am about to share with you in this video. These core principles include intellectual inquiry must be guided by a sincere desire to pursue the truth. Learning can only take place when students and teachers are free to question prevailing views and interrogate first principles. Preserving this freedom requires the cultivation of intellectual humility and charity, and the purpose of an education is not just to equip students with specialized knowledge. More importantly, it is to provide them with the moral and intellectual resources to build flourishing lives. Zephyr goes on to state that, informed by these principles, we aim to complement the work of the university by providing opportunities for in-depth study and individual mentorship that are increasingly scarce on modern campuses. Through our programs, we hope to help students and professionals gain a clear sense of purpose in their vocations. Our goal is to help the next generation of cultural and political leaders to be happier, better, more thoughtful people on those who precede them. On the face of it, all of that sounds fine, but I start to itch whenever language used starts focusing on individual mentorship and vocations and politics because, and I'm so sorry to break this to you if you were unaware, this is incredibly Opus Dei coded language. And when you start picking everything apart, the Opus Dei threads that are running through this allegedly independent academic center are incredibly obvious. But don't just take my word for it. In a January 27th article titled Little Known Network of Higher Ed Institute Has Roots in Anti-Gay Marriage Fight in Opus Dei, author Ryan Quinn identified the Zephyr Institute near Stanford as one of the Foundation for Excellence in Higher Education's network entities. Now, we cannot talk about FIHE without talking about a man named Luis Tellez. And luckily, I can tell you quite a lot about Luis Tellez because he features heavily in Gareth Gore's book. Gore wrote, Luis Tellez grew up in a little town on the Mexican side of the Sonoran Desert and was one of 3 brothers and a family of 8 who joined Opus Dei as numeraries. Trained as an engineer, Tellez found work at a chemical company in St. Louis, where he was also made director of a numerary residence there. In 1981, he was assigned to New York, where he was asked to help out with an endowment being set up by a wealthy Mexican couple. The wife was a supernumerary, and the husband received spiritual direction from an Opus Dei priest who wanted to leave their fortune to good causes. The priest introduced Tellez to the couple, and they agreed to put him in charge of the endowment, which they initially called the Mass Foundation, but which was later renamed the Clover Foundation. It would eventually swell in size to almost $130 million and be absorbed into the sprawling web of supposedly independent Opus Dei foundations in the United States. Tellez's introduction to money management on the behalf of Opus Dei became a trend that continues present day, which brings us back to the Foundation for Excellence in Higher Education. Quote, for Tellez, FIHE marked a decision to target the next generation, a strategy tried by Escriva in the 1930s and 40s after voters failed to engage with the message of the National Organization for Marriage and American Principles Project. When we lost in the political process and in the legal process, I did some thinking about where it is that I can be most helpful, he explained, referring to the defeat regarding same-sex marriage. We're going to devote even more fully to the education of young men and women so that they themselves can take positions in public policy. By 2024, FIHE was present on campus at 14 elite universities across the United States. Tellez plans to build on the expansion of FIHE with the establishment of a number of Catholic institutes on campus for those students interested in exploring their faith. Officially, Opus Dei will have nothing to do with such establishments, but Tellez has discussed his vision for attracting today's youth with the prelate. He also admitted that there is often a great deal of gray area at such Catholic institutes. It is a lay organization. There is no connection to Opus Dei involved in doing this, he explained. Some members of Opus Dei are good because they are reliable thinkers in this regard. They know how to do the legwork. I am not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but I have often felt that Opus Dei engages in a very special kind of obfuscation and doublespeak, whereby listeners who are in the know will pick up on what the true goal of a particular endeavor is, while everyone else remains blissfully ignorant. To my ears, Tellez admitting that Opus Dei members are good at doing the legwork sounds a lot less like boring organizational and managerial chatter and a lot more like something else.
Once I started living there, everything seemed great. We would have dinners together, just talk about our day. It seemed like they were very encouraging. They kind of wanted to act like mentors, the numeraries. Even when I wanted to switch majors, they were very supportive of that. And those ladies themselves are very intelligent and professional women in their fields. They're not just anybody's. So any advice from them at that time, I would take it very seriously, since I deemed them as, I saw them as very intelligent, career-driven women. But then, things started to change. It seemed like they were living with a lot of restrictions. They didn't see their families much at all, which I always thought that was strange. I always saw my family every weekend, which I could tell that they had some resentment towards that. It was just mostly about their jobs, the current political climate, and all of that. It was just very much Opus Dei. Everything was about God. Jose Maria Escriva, my gosh, he was more of a god to them than God himself. It was always about that at the end of the day. They lived for that. They would start inviting me to their circles and their recollections, which at first I did attend them. Just I didn't have many shifts at my job in college at that time, so it was fine. But then once I started getting fed up with the talks, because they would talk about like, oh, like you have to be a good wife, you have to dress a certain way, like modesty. And I just got fed up with it that I ended up taking more shifts at my job at that time. I tried, to get away from them. I would leave home every weekend to, spend as least time as possible there. So yeah, just to avoid them. And then that's when their attitudes towards me changed, when they noticed that I was almost trying to avoid them, because it was like, first I was very involved, and then I had that sudden shift. I remember like one of the things that they were trying to convince me was being against the LGBTQ community. One of the numeraries even gave me a book. I don't remember what the book is called, but like it was even banned on Amazon or something, but I think I only read like a page, and then I eventually like gave it back to them. And then that was like a clear sign to them, like, oh, she's not someone that we can convince or to convert to our thing. Like I guess they thought that they were going to get me to join them, but I guess like those early signs, they were like, yeah, no, like she's not someone that can become like us.
It's also worth noting that Fee, and by way of Fee, Zephyr are not the only Opus-affiliated entities that Tejas is connected to, because he also has connections with the Witherspoon Institute and the James Madison Program at Princeton, which Gareth Gore also identified as having received hundreds of thousands of dollars in Opus Dei funds since their foundations. I think that we can assume that from there, the funds were further distributed along the various legs of the Octopus Dei. There seems to be evidence of that very thing, actually. Fee tax and donor forms from the 2023 tax year revealed that Zephyr had received a $200,000 cash infusion from Fee. And of course, Zephyr has also appeared at Opus-affiliated events, such as the Leadership for America seminar series with Catholic faith formation given in keeping with the spirit of Opus Dei, according to the event landing page. In 2022, the research fellow and director of academic programs at Zephyr Institute presented on Should There Be Harmony Between Moral Truths, Religious Truths, and Civil Law, which is an incredibly interesting presentation title, particularly given what is, in my view, very intentional behavior on the part of individuals and entities closely linked to many of these same players to completely dismantle the church-state separation here in the United States. If you want to know more about that situation and where things kind of currently stand, I have an entire episode dedicated to the subject, which I will link in the description below. So given the different ways Zephyr overlaps and intersects with other Opus Dei affiliated entities, it makes it difficult for me to see Zephyr as a truly independent academic center. I think that this residence functions as a safe haven for conservatives at my university. In my opinion, I think that this has created a way for the conservative Catholic political ecosystem to siphon off promising young people from other secular careers, instead inserting them into a network of shadowy institutions, think tanks, and dark money organizations. On top of all this, there was the issue of the lack of transparency with students and their families. At an important event in 2025, I witnessed numeraries respond dishonestly to parents' questions when, during the course of conversation, one of the parents asked the numerary about her ministry and how she found herself at this particular residence. I remember her saying something vague about how she simply enjoyed serving Christ and young women, which she had been doing at another location, so she was happy to join this residence when invited. Opus Dei or Jose Maria Escriva were never mentioned in any way. I guess this was a lie of omission, and it made me even more suspicious. If there is truly nothing sinister going on between the residents and Opus Dei in general, there should be no need to conceal the residents' role within the organization. At the very least, parents of girls who apply to the residence deserve to know the true nature of the institution to which they entrust their daughters' housing, care, and safety. In my opinion, a brief mention about entrusting this residence's spiritual and doctrinal formation to Opus Dei, a personal prelature of the Catholic Church, is not real transparency. I stayed silent that day because I was alone, stressed about grades, exhausted from an event that I had been cajoled into attending, and dealing with my own personal issues. I was also drained from dealing with the numerary's poorly concealed disapproval of my refusal to get on board. Today, I have chosen to speak out because I don't want more well-meaning parents and families to be deceived like I was. I made many choices and suppressed my true feelings and discomfort to protect my peace and survive in an anomalous, suffocating environment. I don't want other girls to have to live this way. The Thomistic Institute. According to the Thomistic Institute's About page, the Institute is part of the Pontifical Faculty of the Immaculate Conception at the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C., and was founded in 2009. They state, the Thomistic Institute exists to promote Catholic truth in our contemporary world by strengthening the intellectual formation of Christians at universities and the Church and in the wider public square. The thought of St. Thomas Aquinas, the universal doctor of the Church, is our touchstone. In TI's 2024 annual report, the president of TI boasted their great success on the 8th anniversary of the Campus Chapters program and expanding across university campuses in the United States, quote, into a large and growing apostolate at nearly 100 college campuses. By establishing these campus chapters, TI is then able to facilitate bringing top Catholic intellectuals on campus to instigate conversations around subjects such as Catholic feminism and 13th century debates on human freedom. If you are viewing this episode, note the map on screen now, which indicates the locations of TI chapters across the country, several of which are on the West Coast, which is where I focused the majority of my research into Opus Dei student residences for this episode. I point it out because I think it is good to call out patterns when they appear, and like I am always saying, birds of a feather flock together. I am sure some would say that it's purely coincidental, but based on what I ended up finding when I went digging, I am of the personal opinion that in this world, nothing is accidental. TI brings Catholic young people together in one easy-to-find place via lectures and retreats. It's a fantastic way to interact with and potentially influence the next generation of Catholic intellectuals. And the desire to do just that is something that TI and Opus Dei seem to have in common. Although I am unsure how deep the relationship between the two entities go, it is clear that one exists. On an anecdotal note, a former attendee of a student residence on the West Coast told me that she had noticed that some of the same students that she saw at her residence also began participating in TI events after a new chapter was launched on her campus. But the links between Opus Dei and TI seem to extend much further. For example, Opus Dei priest Father Stephen Brock has been platformed by TI. In March of 2024, Brock presented a lecture on free will at the University of Texas Austin TI student chapter. He has also been featured on the official Thomistic Institute podcast, and from what I saw while I was doing research, appears to be a perfect manifestation of what an Opus Dei Thomistic union should look like, which is certainly interesting. Another point of intersection between TI and Opus Dei lie at the feet of the Napa Institute Foundation, headed by Opus Dei affiliated heavyweights Leonard Leo and Timothy Bush. According to a website titled Branded Catholicism, the Napa Institute Foundation allegedly endowed the Thomistic Institute with $30,000 on at least one occasion, which would appear to imply to me that some sort of relationship exists between Opus Dei and TI, filtered down through these various entities. But there is more. In a 2022 article published on NCR, author John Gehring revealed that in December of 2022, the Napa Institute posted a picture of Leo, Bush, and Archbishop Timothy Broglio dining at a restaurant together in Washington. Others attending the dinner included Dominican Father Aquinas Gilbo, chaplain and director of campus ministry at Catholic University, and Dominican Father Dominic Leggy, I'm honestly not really sure, director of the Thomistic Institute and assistant professor of theology at the Pontifical Faculty of the Immaculate Conception in Washington. I found even more indications of connections all over the author's page of the Witherspoon Institute's public discourse site as well. I am pretty sure that I could just keep pulling and pulling at all of these little threads that run through and connect everything and never reach the end of them. The Opus Dei element runs through American Catholicism quite deeply, to a far greater extent than I think mainstream American Catholics are aware of.
During the second half, which was, I want to say about March, April, I was already dealing with a medical issue, and then adding on to like that mental stress that they would add. There was like a point where I felt like I was just being constantly watched by them. Even when I would like nicely say good morning, good night to them, they would be like kind of careless about it. Like I could tell that, they just didn't like me at that point, and like that just caused a lot of stress. And it's not that I wanted them to like me, but it was just more like, let's be cordial about it and everything. So I just felt really stressed living there, especially because I just felt so conflicted in my head about like what's the right way to live? Is it the way is it the way that they live? Is it correct because they say it is and they're, these smart women, or is it me, the way that I live correctly, as a free spirit, just exploring, doing what I love, learning and stuff. That internal conflict in me also just caused so much stress because like I just wasn't happy being there because like their values really conflicted with mine, and that just gave me like a whole other crisis at that point. And so like it led me to just have a lot of like challenges, and I had to like cope with alcohol at that time, because like I didn't know how else to feel because I just hated being there. I just hated so much being there that I just wanted to numb myself. So like I didn't know any better until like later on I decided to like seek professional help by by a therapist, which they also looked down upon that, because they later on they said that I was crazy, that like like spiritual direction is better. Oh, like you don't need a therapy, like you just need God. You need like just to talk to a priest, talk to one of the numeraries, like they're gonna help you get it together. The last ever retreat that I went to, and the only reason why I went is because I paid for it early. When I went, like one of the numeraries like pulled me aside and said like, oh, I think like the next step for you would be spiritual direction so you could know your vocation exactly. And so that added a lot of pressure because I was only 20 at that time. Like, what vocation? Like, I'm still like figuring out everything. Like, why are you pressuring me so much to think about these things? Like, I'm not even interested. Again, I wasn't interested in talking to them, in confiding in them, and personal things. Especially when it comes to my faith, they had actually invited me to come back to live with them because they were asking residents, oh, like, do you want to like come back and stuff? And I was telling my parents I don't want to, like I really don't want to, like I'll try to get a university apartment through the lottery system, but they were like, no, like let's like it's just one more year anyway. So I I told them, okay, fine, I'll come back. So they had given me another contract already. So like I was basically set to come back for another year there, but then now actually leading to the final conversation, the day prior, I got really drunk, really, really drunk. So they were quote unquote concerned. I thought like when they were concerned, I thought they were concerned about me, but I guess looking back, they were more concerned about the image that I was maybe giving to Opus Dei, or I'm not really sure how to describe it because like we said, Opus Dei looks for people that are smart, that like are look good in society, like just people that are presentable, I guess. And me being messy in that regard of getting like that drunk was just not looked great upon. So they decided to kick me out in a sense, but mostly like just rescind my acceptance back for that following school year because I had already given them the deposit, which it's explicitly said in the contract that they weren't supposed to give it back because it was non-refundable. But instead, they eventually did give it back, to get rid of me. They wanted nothing to do with me, so it was just easier for them to just give me the money back without any issues. And as they were having the conversation with me, they were saying that like I was not a good fit to live there, that the residence is a family environment, that like I'm not like able to live there based on my behavior, that I should look for somewhere else that meets more of my needs. So that conversation wasn't that bad. That numerary is an educator herself, so she knew how to communicate that to me in a more nicer, professional way. But in the other room, one of the other numeraries was talking to my mom, and she was telling my mom that I was crazy, that I was mentally unstable, that I like should not be there, that I should be, getting help from someone. So it was very different conversation. So for my mom, it was much, much harsher news to take, that I was, getting kicked out of there. They also even said like, "Oh, you're always welcome to come back though to our circles, to our recollections, to everything else, but just not as a resident." Like that was like the only thing that I was not able to come back to. And so like at that point I just wanted like to get out, and I was like, yeah, sure. So that same day that I was giving the news, I got everything out. Like I've never packed this fast in my life. Then my parents were there in like 2 to 3 hours, I want to say. So yeah, they picked me up and everything, and yeah.
I stayed away from critically analyzing most of the individuals who contribute to this web in an effort to not make it seem like I'm out here on a witch hunt, but that is where many of these connections come from, which makes it all feel deeply personal, and I have to imagine that that is a part of the psychological thrall that authoritarianism seems to hold over people's lives. To any other research nerds out there like me, just know that there is so much more here than I will ever be able to cover. So if you're in search of a new rabbit hole, I would be happy to share this one.
If there's ends up being someone who listens to our interview and the piece that I'm going to put together who is a young person, maybe they come from an Opus Dei family, maybe they don't, maybe they're pressured or being told to consider an Opus Dei student residence for their college years, what words of advice do you have, if any, for someone in that position?
Really do your research before joining something. Like really like look into it, like dive really deep and see, like, is this really like what I want to join? Like, will I be happy here? Before agreeing to do anything, because that's something that I didn't do. I didn't do my research. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So that would be my word of advice. Like, if their mission stands out to you, I guess great, to each their own, join it. But I wouldn't. Like, I would want to, like, to any young person, I would recommend to not commit to anything, to just be free, see what you like out there. There's so many things to do. Like, why commit to that one thing, especially something so restrictive, just so secret. But yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Any positive experience or memory I had at that Opus Dei student residence is tarnished by the knowledge that Opus Dei and its centers have contributed to the current political situation and the degradation of democracy under the Trump administration. It makes me angry that religious institutions like Opus Dei can interfere in matters of state and cultivate their own right-wing political players with impunity and wanton disregard for the separation of church and state. The public deserves to know that this is happening in plain sight, even at liberal college campuses like my university. My sincerest thanks to Samantha and Jennifer for taking the time to tell me about your experiences and share your thoughts and feelings with me. While we all understand and recognize that the system that I took everyone through today does not feel inherently dishonest or exploitative to everyone, based on your experiences and the experiences of so many former members, it certainly wound up feeling that way for a rather concerning number of people. I would hope that in the interest of moving toward a more just, safe, and uplifting world, all of this could be used as an impetus for positive change. At the very least, conversations create space for awareness, dialogue, and hopefully true informed consent going forward. To Samantha, Jennifer, and everyone else who took the time to answer my questions and give me insight, thank you. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or transformative in any way, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. If you have a story or an experience to share or know someone that does, send me an email at thedeepdiveproject@protonmail.com. Remember that I have a list of mental health resources, details to learn more about my work, connect with me on social media, or support my endeavors, all linked down below. Also, don't forget that in addition to YouTube, you can find Beck Griffin and the Deep Dive Project on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much anywhere podcasts live. If you listen there, please be sure to leave a 5-star rating or a kind comment. It helps my work to reach more people. If you feel like hanging around, go check out some of the other playlists and content on the community tab over on my channel. Thank you for being here, and remember, Nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.